I'm Alan Blair and this is my episode of the 24 and we're going freelining. Oh, I've been looking forward to this session, 24-hour stalking. It's the end of August and I've brought you along to Park Farm Fisheries. It's a syndicate complex comprising of 3 lakes. There's a kind of stock pond over the back here that's broken up into 2 parts. It was really difficult, I'm definitely going to be heading over there. To my left, you've got the sort of specimen main lake called Heather, and there's a further lake right out the back here. All 3 of the lakes have got some mega fishing, singles, doubles, 20s, and even some 30-pounders, and I'm really hoping to get amongst a few of them. As I said, it's a freelining session, and I'm going to be covering baits on the surface, baits drifting down through the water, and on the bottom itself. I'm really looking forward to it, so without further ado, we're going to get going. It's currently 7:39. Let's start the stop clock. Let's go. Freelining it's about as simple as it comes. It's taking a rod, taking a reel, main line, pass through the guides, and then attaching a hook onto the end. It's a real simple way to fish. It doesn't involve any technicalities, any clutter. Doesn't cost much to do it. Yeah, it's just a real pure way of going fishing. It's a little bit quiet, I'll be honest. Not seen any crashes, not seen any shows. And I'm losing the light now. Now, when you're freelining, it does help to have the hours of daylight for sure, which kind of puts me in a little bit of a predicament for this evening. And to be honest, the whole shoot's been a little bit hard to judge in terms of really I can only fish in the hours of daylight. So when do I start? And I called it as late as possible, which will in turn let me fish all of tomorrow, which is what I really want. The daylight hours disappeared quite quickly at Park Farm, which kind of presents a problem with regards to freeline, but it doesn't mean you can't still carry on doing it. I had the Moonshine Megalight with me, I had some spare batteries, and as much as it was now pitch black, I walked around all of the venues time and time again looking for fish. It's a tactic I've used for many, many years now, a big bright light to beam up bits of water to identify where they are. Now, on that particular instance, I decided not to run around all night long looking for opportunities and fish. I could have done, but when you're going out for a full day's freelining stalking, it really does take it out of you. So about sort of 10:30 that night, I decided to get some sleep, ready for a very, very fresh start the next day. Back at the motor, everything's packed away. I've just got the essentials I need for the day. Quickly stuck the kettle on while I was knocking up a mix. Yeah, it's good to kickstart the day with a nice coffee. Made one for the boys. Yeah, the mix itself, I've got a full bucket now. I just did sort of a third last night. It's really to get them grubbing around. As I said yesterday, the water clarity is pretty dreadful, and I'm going to rely on the fish giving away their presence by feeding. Basically, tails up, puffing on the bottom, creating a plume of mud coming up. That's going to be my indicator that there's fish down there. So in the mix itself, there's lots of 2mm pellet. I've got some Scopex squid stick mix, some small particle mix, large particle mix, some sweet corn, hemp seed, and a bit of salt with squid juice over the top. So yeah, lots and lots of different attraction levels in there, lots of different particle sizes and visual colours as well. Potentially, if I drop some of this onto a much shallower spot, I'll be able to identify if it's been eaten, if the corn's been gone, or the maize, or the red dari seed. So yeah, that's the bucket mix knocked up. I've got a little rucksack there with a tub of sweet corn, some worms and some maggots. I'll have my baiting pouch around my waist or over my shoulder with some slicker floaters and some soft hookables in. Of course, I've got some bread with me, and I'm literally self-sufficient now. I can wander around looking for opportunities and hopefully make something happen. For me, freelining falls into 3 categories. On the surface, you know, bit of bread, dog biscuit, fish are coming up, sucking it down, minimal disturbance when casting out. Number 2 would be a slow sinking bait, maybe taking that same bit of bread, squeezing it a little bit, letting it slowly flutter down, or incorporating maggots, threading a load of maggots onto the shank of the hook. They're wriggling and rivering and slowly sinking down. You can use that maybe when a fish is laid up in a particular area, or possibly when fish are passing through the swim. And then the third one will be directly on the bottom. I've put a little bit of bait in a mix. The fish are grubbing around down there. I can see tail patterns and vortexes, and I can very, very discreetly free line, maybe a bit of core, maybe a boilie, maybe a worm into that area without any disturbance whatsoever. Yeah, they're my three main areas where I would use free lining tactics. I've just crept into this quiet bay. It's like the only bay last night. There was a little bit of coloured water. I mentioned that I think I got here too late and it was actually just sort of dispersing. There wasn't actually fish down there feeding. I did check it later on, didn't see anything, but I've crept in here now and there's 3 small carp in here. I've just put a little bit of bread out. That's really sort of put them on edge and pushed them back into these snags a little bit more. But I'm going to put a few more bits out and then just put a little pinch of the mix in where I baited last night. I baited 2 areas, one in the sort of mouth of those trees there and one out in the open. I'm not going to bait in the snags today. They've had some free food there. It's all about getting them feeding on this spot here out in open water. I've got a much greater chance of landing one. When the water clarity isn't good, it doesn't mean you can't free line. You know, black shapes can still be seen, but if it's really, really muddy, I'll often incorporate bait into this sort of scenario to help me. By feeding a mix down onto the bottom and the fish coming in and feeding, I might well see tail patterns, I might well see plumes of mud coming up, I might see distortions of water, vortexes. All of those things would be sort of telltale signs that something's going on down there and be a reason for me to get my free lining rod and get a bait into that zone. Once I'm in the swim, I'm in a bit of a catch-22 situation. Ideally, I want to be hidden behind a tree or down in the reeds or laying on the floor almost so the fish don't know that I'm there. However, it really helps to be stood up to allow me to have a better vantage of what's going on. So you just have to evaluate each situation. If you've got a big tree there that you can get behind and just sort of peer around, fantastic. If you haven't, it may be that you have to stay very, very low to the floor. If you're in a situation where it's not gin clear and you're not actually watching those fish take the hook bait, it can become a little bit problematic. The last thing I want to be doing is foul hooking fish. You know, you free lined your bait out there, it's floated down onto the bottom or it's slow sinking down and all of a sudden the line starts twitching. Don't strike. You know, you start striking at that, there could be every possibility that the line's just masked round the back of the fish, it's gone round a peck or whatever, and you end up foul hooking them. No, I don't want that, you don't want that, you don't want to be bringing in the fish of your dreams and it's not hooked in the mouth. So the golden rule for me is I wait until there's a significant amount of line been taken. And I also never fish over the top of the fish. I'll always fish short, making the fish come up to me to the hook bait, i.e. they're approaching it like that. My line's going down here to absolutely minimise the chances of possibly foul hooking anything. Oh, that was really exciting, proper boom, 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 boom. Walked in here and could see the whole sort of bay coloured up, to be fair, even though I've only baited this bit here. And I knew immediately they'd been in there and they turned it over so much that it plumed up the whole area. Anyway, sat here nice and quiet, put a bit of corn out, spooked one mirror, but only sort of out this way a little bit. Made another cast with a double corn again, saw 2 different mirrors from that first one I'd seen. But the casts weren't great, it landed a little bit short. Decided because of the plop, even with 2 little bits of sweet corn, it was making too much of a plop. Switched over to maggots, put about 10, 12 maggots on the hook, overcast it a little bit, trickled it back in. And at this point, I could now see that all 3 of them down there, and it sort of quietened down a little bit. They pushed off a little bit more. There was the odd pinprick bubble coming up. I knew they were there, but they were off the back of the feed, really. And yeah, out of nowhere, a little common comes and takes a bait, but really, really exciting. It's probably going to do another bite at some point today, but definitely that disturbance now will have pushed everything out of here. But they're obviously liking it in here with the shade and the cover from the trees. So we'll unhook him, slip him back, put a little bit more bait in and leave these fish in peace for a few hours. Nine and a half hours remaining. Yeah, managed to nick that small common in the back bay of the sort of main lake, headed onto the back lake. There was a couple of opportunities. There was one fish in a sort of set of reeds. By the time I'd sort of got a bait prepared, he'd sort of vacated it. Then there was another one feeding on the mix. That was a really good chance, but yeah, the chance blew. It spooked out. Had a little go on the bread bomb. There was one fish taking bread. Didn't have any interest in my hook bait, even though I managed to sort of suspend it over a small branch, giving me really good placement. I will go back there. I put a few freebies in before I left. Come across to this lake now. There's a few about here. Put a little bit of mix in here, and there's a few small ones. There was some better ones in there, but they seem to have drifted out now. And I've seen one half decent koi down the other end of the lake taking the odd bit of bread. So I'm going to put a bait in here now. I'm going to try a worm. Hook bait options for free lining, well, I suppose they're endless. For me though, the common ones I use, definitely bread, definitely dog biscuits, definitely slicker floaters, imitation floating baits, maggots 100%, do a lot of free lining with maggots. Worms are also very, very good. And then I suppose you can get creative after that. You know, in years gone by, I've used things like sugar puffs, marshmallows. Yeah, like I say, anything that floats, anything that you can sort of side hook onto a hook very, very simply and easy, there's a good possibility it'll do you a bite. Just over 8 hours remaining. Managed 3 very, very small carp over there. Not exactly what we're looking for. Just sit over my shoulder now, a tail up in the air like this. I'm going to creep in here. This is the small bay where I caught the common from earlier. Get a bait in position, sit nice and quietly, try and get another one. If I had to pick just one bait to free line with, it would have to be bread. Maggots are quite difficult to get hold of. You know, especially when you're in New Zealand or China, you know, trying to get hold of a pint of maggots is not that easy. You've got to look after them as well. Whereas a bit of bread, I can stop at any shop, anywhere in the world, grab some bread and go free lining. The bread is also really versatile in terms of you can make it float, you can make it slow sink, and you can fish it on the bottom. The colour, with it being white, is often, you know, very enticing to the fish, and in many situations, especially in those more built up urban locations, the carp are used to seeing it. Yeah, if I had to pick one bait to free line with forever, it would be a bit of bread. It took quite some time, and to be honest, I was very, very close to going back onto a squeezed bread bomb just to let it sink down, but I really did want to get one off the top. Clearly don't really get fish for, don't really see bread that often, and they've been just swimming underneath it, almost waiting for bits to fall off. For sure, a much quicker bite would have been a bit on the bottom, but that is so exciting catching them like that. Don't get me wrong, sitting behind bite alarms can be really exciting, spodding over the top of free rigs, really exciting, fishing with a boat at a big lake in Europe, really exciting, but nothing beats that up close and personal of hunting, stalking, finding your quarry and then making the attack to catch it. Just under 7 hours left. Had that common earlier on this morning on the maggot, lost that one on the sweet corn on the main lake, which I'm still a bit gutted about, to be fair. Had this one now on the bread bomb, had 3 little ones earlier on the worm. I think I'm going to get this one back. Yeah, 7 hours remaining, go back onto the main lake, see if we can nick enough one on sweet corn. I've literally been priming the same 6 or 7 areas, and I'm just going to keep revisiting them, looking for coloured water or tail patterns. But yeah, slowly starting to get amongst a few. If I had to pick 3 mega top tips or kind of essential things with regards to going out on a free lining session, number 1, it'd be being prepared. You know, making sure you've got everything to hand, you've got surplus spare bait with you should you be having a good session, you've got an extra catapult should it break, even extra polarised sunglasses in case you snap them. You know, you don't want to burden yourself down with loads of kit, so strip it right back to the absolute bare essentials. Yeah, that would be a real important tip. Number 2 would definitely be the sunglasses. Polarised glasses are so important for this style of fishing. They take glare off the water and they allow you to see things you wouldn't otherwise see. And the final one would be stay on your toes. You've got a massive job ahead of you if you're going to go out and do a full day sort of free lining. I make sure I'm well rested the night before, plenty of sleep. You could be doing 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 steps, you know, round and round and round fisheries. You're going up and down trees. Yeah, it's a very relentless form of angling that involves a massive amount of effort and energy. Yeah, get out there, get on your toes, stay mobile, go and find them. Just getting the bread bomb loaded up with a fresh bit of the good old white stuff. I like to use a crust, take it and sort of roll it in 3 or 4 times. So you get almost like a Swiss roll effect. And then without squeezing it too much, just holding it there, take the bread bomb, you can open it up. You can be really quite brutal with these. You know, the latex is really strong. Using 2 or 3 fingers, 2 fingers and a thumb, get it inside there and just let it contract back around, and that's it, pinched into place. You know, even today I've had, in some instances, 3 or 4 casts out of 1 bit of bread. You just wouldn't be able to achieve that if you were mounting it normally by sort of pulling the hook through and twisting it around. You might get a second cast, but certainly not 3 or 4. If the fish are not really up for it, like they have been today, a slow sinking bit of bread can be absolutely deadly. To sort of change that from floating to sinking, all I do is dab it in the water a little bit and just give it a good squeeze in the centre, potentially dab it a second time, squeeze it again, and that'll be enough to allow the water to absorb in there and just make it break the surface film and slowly flutter down. And then in that instance, I'll be watching the line for little twitches. You know, the fish are in the area, potentially tail patterns and bubbles, but once that line starts to snake off, that's when you know you've got your bite on the bottom. Really, really simple tactic. And yeah, there's been so many instances right around the world where a good old bit of bread can usually get you a carp when another bait might fail. For sure, I've caught my fair share of small carp over the years freelining, and I still love nothing more than going to a park lake, finding a little 8-pound ghostie in the corner somewhere and catching it off the top, freelining with a bit of bread. However, it can also be a big fish tactic, and I've been very lucky to catch some massive fish over the years, well over 50 pounds, by simply using rod, reel, line and a hook. If you're on a venue, and in that venue there is a particular carp you want to catch, perhaps it's the big un, perhaps it's the zip linear, the fully scale, the oldest one in the lake, the big orange ghostie, whatever it is, through freelining you can be selective. It is almost impossible to chuck bottom bait rods out into the lake and demand what fish picks it up. However, with freelining you can. If there's a group of fish in an area, maybe your target fish is there, don't fish or don't cast until that particular fish is feeding. Or if you're fishing on the surface and another fish comes up to take the bait but it's not the one you're after, you get the opportunity to pull it out of the way. It's a very unique form of fishing where you can be incredibly selective, and in many people's cases that would be catching the biggest fish they can. Did the second time. Literally took it, dropped down. It's been doing what the fish have been doing all day, to be fair. You tend to find this at the back end of the summer when they've been floater fished. Instead of just sort of engulfing floaters or slurping down bits of bread, they'll often take it underneath the surface and hold it there momentarily. Basically, they've learned, you know. So it pays this time in the year to not strike too early. In the spring and that, it's all about quick reaction times. Yes. It's nice to get this one after pulling out of it earlier, fishing up against the reeds. To be fair, I nearly never got my second opportunity. It literally took the bread down, kind of spat it back out again, and then done a 180, come back and took it. A real old one, proper character. And I'm sure it's made lots and lots of people happy over the years, none so more than me today. It's been tricky, you know, so to catch some fish like this, yeah, really rewarding. I'm gonna head back to the main lake now, keep those spots topped up, and finish off the day drifting slicker floaters along the reed, see if we can get one off the surface. Freelining is great in terms of you don't need multiple rods, you don't need loads of gear, it's pretty stripped back. For me, the essentials are a sawn-off rod, 6 foot in length. I use the 3-pound version, which covers me for all eventualities. A Scope GT 4000 reel, so a small, light, compact reel. On the spool, I'll have 10-pound zig float, and I'll also have 2 spare spools with me, one with 15-pound zig float and one with 20-pound bullet mono. The 10, the 15 and the 20 will cover me for every situation, whether I'm fishing for small carp in open water. I like that fine line, it allows me to cast further, right up to fishing with a 20-pound bullet mono in the middle of dense, big lily pads or weed beds and extracting huge carp from it. I'd have a utility pouch that the rod and the reel would be stored inside, as well as the scope Black Ops net. That all fits into that tiny scope utility pouch. And on the outside of that pouch is a number of pouches, which feature my small terminal tackle components. There'll be hooks in there, there'll be some hook grease in there, maybe some Tipp-Ex, some bread bombs. Yeah, I need a catapult, I need my scope baiting pouch full of bait, unhooking that on my back, maybe a small scope stash pack if I'm gonna fill it up with some extra bread. Freelining allows you to travel very light, very burden free, and put maximum effort into going to find the carp. I've crept into this little hole here. I've baited it ever since I've got here, but this is the first time I've seen a fish down there. He's actually gone now. It's really, really shallow. I don't know if I've totally spooked him, but I'm going to give it a few more minutes just because of the disturbance of getting in and out here. It's a right pain. Just had a little twitch then on the line, and then I don't know if there's loads of little fish down there though. There's certainly no bubbles coming up. Can't see any black shapes. What I'd really like to see is tail patterns, slow ones, like slow vortexes. You know, when you get big old swell, it's usually because a fish is bolted out. But if you get like a nice, gentle, just movement and rocking of water, yeah, like that, more often than not, there's one down there. I just see the water rock, and the line, it had been twitching, but that was like a proper glide away. I was quite lucky I had this little reed for it to rest on the top of. Well, literally slipped the ghosty back, had a wander around to the back bay. They've just not got back in there, sadly. Come and checked in this little quiet corner here, and there was one fish. I'm pretty sure it wasn't this one. The one I see looked quite a lot bigger, but I'll take that. Right result, a ball of maggots, and literally a small handful over the top, probably 30 or 40 maggots thrown in. And then the hook bait sort of settled in amongst it, and I didn't have to wait long. A few twitches on the line and off it went. Really, really nice one. Very, very clean fish. Mega one. Although I haven't been able to incorporate it into this particular freelining session, my 60-second top tip definitely is try and incorporate slow sinking maggots into your fishing. The situation you're looking for is when the fish are up in the water, you can see those big black shapes, and ideally they're passing across the swim left to right or right to left. I like to take little bits of critical balancing foam, usually out of one stick I can get 4, cut them, burn each end with a lighter, roll those up and basically create your own imitation foam maggots. I then thread real maggots onto the hook, 2 or 3 foam maggots, and I can slow that bait falling down through the water to coincide it with the fish passing across the swim. The two things meet and the fish usually engulfs the bait and you can strike. I think most people with the best intentions think, yeah, I'm gonna go and do a bit of stalking. And they kind of reel their bottom bait rods in, they maybe go for a little wander, 15 minutes, half an hour, don't find anything, and then go back into their comfort zone, go back to the bivvy, get the rods back out, get the kettle back on. I think people ignore it because it's hard work. They maybe don't see the things they want to see immediately. You know, hand on heart, sometimes I've had to go around 10 times before I've even found a single opportunity. I think it's the level of effort that it takes, it puts people off, yeah, and they prefer to carp fish in a more traditional way. That is my 24 hours up. It's been a challenge, definitely difficult. It's not really been the ultimate freelining day. Weather's been a bit all over the place, back end of the summer, haven't seen any shapes really drifting around, but I've still managed 4 fish, and most importantly, I've really, really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot about the venue, I've learned a lot about the fish, where they like to spend their time. I've managed to get some really exciting moments going, and yeah, I wouldn't change that. If I've got to come out again tomorrow and do it all again, I'll go freelining.